Gimel of Shviis. We're up to Mishnah Hey, which is on page 423 of your Mishnah Behira. And what the Perek deals with are things that you are really permitted to do during Shemitah, but have become rabbinically prohibited because of Maris Ayin. People looking at what you're doing in your field will suspect that what you're doing is to prepare the field, is to work the field in the seventh year. Today we're gonna see an example of things that you can't do in the sixth year, because it looks like you're preparing the field for the seventh year. If you remember, the very first topic in the Maseches was Tos v'Shviis, and in Tos v'Shviis there were things prohibited to be done plowing a tree field after Shavuos, because it's not beneficial for the trees any longer. There's no moisture in the ground, and the only possible reason to plow a tree field after Shavuos would be to do something beneficial for the ground for the seventh year. So that's prohibited. So there are things, as we've said several times, there are things that are permitted but became prohibited because of Maris Ayin, and Chazal were very, very sensitive to Maris Ayin during Shemitah, because it is a very public display of an observance of a mitzvah. The fields are wide open, people can see what everyone else is doing in their fields, and if he can do it, I can do it, but it may be he's doing it for a perfectly legitimate purpose, and you may not be doing it for a perfectly legitimate purpose, and we're going to take a look at that today. And therefore, if he can do it, I can do it, and before you know it, the next person is going to do it, and before you know it, we have a whole community doing it, and the news gets out, etc. So Chazal took control of the situation. Things that are Maris Ayin, that it appears to a person looking on that you're doing something to work the field in Shviis, they prohibited it. Up until now, we've been talking about what do you do in a field when you want to bring out piles of manure. And we have to make sure that you bring it out at a certain time, which we learned about. And you have to make sure that you're bringing it out in an amount that doesn't look like you're fertilizing the field. So at some point during Shemitah, and we learned that there are different shitas. We'll use the Tanakama shita is when the violators of Shemitah finished bringing the manure into the field, then you can start bringing manure in the field. Rabbi Yehuda said when the manure begins to harden, you can bring it into the field. And then you can only bring it into the field in certain amounts. Why? People looking will say you are fertilizing your field during Shemitah. Is fertilizing biblically prohibited? No. We keep on repeating, there are only 4 malachos, 4 acts that are prohibited during Shemitah, and they are enumerated in Parshas Bahar. Watering a field is not mentioned there, it's rabbinically prohibited. Fertilizing a field during Shviis is rabbinically prohibited. Nevertheless, Chachamim said that even though fertilizing a field is rabbinically prohibited, you still can't do it in certain ways during Shemitah. You can't fertilize a field during Shemitah because it's rabbinically prohibited. And even if you want to bring manure into the field, not for the purpose of fertilizing, you have to do it in the following way so nobody thinks when they watch you doing it that you're fertilizing your field. So that's how far Chazal went. Fertilizing the field is only rabbinically prohibited. And here Chazal is saying, even if you're going to bring manure into the field and you have no intention of fertilizing the field, this is how you bring it into the field, and this is the quantity you can bring it into the field, and this is the time you can bring it into the field during Shemitah, lest someone looking says, oh, he's getting ready or he is fertilizing his field. Today we open with a new subject, same issue, not manure, but same issue of onlookers, Maris Ayin. Somebody has a field, and the field it's a good stone field. In other words, beneath the surface of the dirt, there are stones. You can make this field into a quarry and dig stone out of it. but we have a little problem. Can you start digging the field to remove the stone during Shemitah? There's nothing wrong with digging up a field and then cutting rock from underneath. Nothing wrong with that. But onlookers will think that the reason you're digging your field during Shemitah is to plant. So even though your intention is perfectly fine, I'm undigging the field so that I can cut stone, and I need the stone. Either I'm going to sell the stone or I'm going to build a house with the stone. It's perfectly legitimate, nothing wrong with that. But onlookers will think you are undigging the field in order to plant. Good for him, good for me. Next person says good for me. So now we're going to be talking about, can you undig your field in order to open a quarry or in order to remove rocks from the field, stone. So on page 423, Mishnah Hay. And the introduction that I just mentioned is at the bottom of page 423. If you look on the left side of your page, there's something called Ikar Mefarshim. And on the end of the very first long line of Ikar Mefarshim, there's a big word in bold. Hakdama, Lemishnayos Hey Dash Yud. Introduction to the next Mishnayos 5 through 10, which are going to discuss removal of stone from a field. And as we did with the first four Mishnayos in this parak, which was just to get basic concepts of Maris Ayin, we didn't focus in particular on every item of how to take out the menorah and when to take out the menorah. We focused on the general principles. We did go through the Shviis. We focused generally on the principles. We're going to do the same thing here just to give us an idea of, again, Maris Ayin, so that we become sensitive to Maris Ayin, because a lot of us have fields or gardens, and we grow plants, we grow pomegranate trees, we grow olive trees, we grow all kinds of trees. And we need to understand that there are certain things you can't do in Shemitah biblically, certain things you can't do during Shemitah rabbinically, and certain things that even though they're perfectly legitimate, you can't do it because your neighbor may be watching you and there's a question of Maris Ayin. So those are the concepts we want to get. I don't think anybody that's listening to the Shiur has a garden that they want to undig to create a quarry out of. So the idea of the Mishnah is to become sensitive to the Maris Ayin. Page 423, Mishnah Hay. Lo yiftach adam machzev. Machzev is a quarry. Lo yiftach adam machzev batchila detov sadehu. Now, we're talking about a field that was, Shemitah comes, and the field is dirt. You can't see any stone. You can't see any stone. So if you start digging, people think that the reason that you're digging is to dig a field. If the field was undug before Shemitah and everybody can see you're removing rock from it, we're going to see the Mishnah that tells us not a problem at all. Before Shviis, the field was open and you can see the rock. But if it was covered when Shemitah came, was covered with dirt, you can't undig it because someone will think that you're preparing it to plant the area. Ad sheyeh bo shalosh murbios. Murbia is a cube. If you take a look at page 424, we'll explain what the measurement is. But if you take a look at page 424, picture 83, it looks like a Rubik's Cube. A murbia is a cube, okay? And you're going to need 3 such cubes. The 3 cubes are put together in picture 82. On page 424, you have picture 82. If you take a look there, you have 3 cubes. Now we take apart each of the cubes. That's picture 83. So the Mishnah says, and then we'll take a look at the picture. The Mishnah says at the top of page 424, you have to, in order to be able to remove stone from a quarry, when Shemitah came, a piece of the field had to be open. It had to be exposed. so that 3 cubes of stone, shehem sholosh al rum sholosh, it's 3 by 3 by 3, shiuram esrim v'sheva avodim. It means that the quarry, when Shemitah started, you were able to see this kind of measurement, which equals 27 stones. If when Shemitah started, this measurement in your field was uncovered, so now you can remove stone from your field, and you can take as much stone as you want, because the quarry, quote unquote, the halacha quarry, which is this shear, 3 cubes. If 3 cubes could be seen before Shemitah started, then all your neighbors understand that this is going to be a field used for a quarry. And then you can remove stone during Shemitah. If the field is completely covered when Shemitah starts, you can't start digging it at all during Shemitah. But if when Shemitah starts, a part of the field is uncovered and exposed is 27 stones, and the stones have a certain measurement, which we're going to come back to, then people know this is going to be a field that you're using for a quarry, and you can remove the stone. So the Mishnah says the measurement are 3 cubes. Each of the cubes, they're going to be 3 cubes. Now each of the 3 cubes have to be 3 by 3 by 3, and 3 by 3 by 3 will give you 27 stones. So let's take a look at picture 83. Picture 83 splits the 3 cubes into separate cubes. You have, the cube is an amma. There are different ways to picture this. It shows you in the picture amma. So let's call this the width. The width of the stone is an amma. And let's call this the height of the stone. Okay, it's 1 amma by 1 amma. And you can see what we'll call the depth of the stone is 3. So each stone by itself is 1 by 1 by 3. When you add the 3 stones together, you have 1 by 1, 1 by 1, 1 by 1. So this row is 3 by 3 by 3. This row is 3 by 3 by 3. This row is 3 by 3 by 3. So each cube has 3 rows. Each of them together is 3 by 3 by 3. Each stone is 1 by 1 by 3. And each row is 3 by, each morbia, each cube is 3 by 3 by 3. Each of these cubes have 9 stones. 1 by 1 by 3. And each cube has 9 stones. You put the cubes together in the picture above, and you have 27 stones of this measurement. The whole field is covered in the picture, except before Shemitah, this amount of the field had been dug out. Exposed is the shear that would give off 27 stones. If this is what the field looks like when Shemitah starts, you can continue removing stone from there, because nobody will suspect you of planting a field. Before Shemitah started, you showed everybody that this field is going to be dug for stone. So that's the first Mishnah, that's Mishnah Hey. That Mishnah that we just dealt with is case 1, making a field into a quarry during Shemitah. Mishnah Vav, a new case. A person has a fence of stone. That seems very innocent. He has a fence of stone around his field. And now he wants to remove the fence. Why does he want to remove the fence? A perfectly legitimate reason. He needs the stone to build something. He needs the stone to replace stones in his house. Whatever it is, his purpose is absolutely legitimate. However, what can an onlooker think? He's removing the stone fence, and what's he going to do beneath the stone fence? He's going to make the field bigger. He's going to plant underneath the stone fence. He's going to remove the stone fence, and now there'll be new ground that's exposed, and he's going to plant underneath. He's going to plant on that ground which was once covered by the fence. Can you do that during Shemitah? Can you remove a stone fence? Okay, it's not a perfect picture, Yosef. You're a photographer, so we appreciate it's not a perfect picture. It's a field that's been, they're trying to show you a field that's been exposed before Shemitah so that there's a shiur in there of 27 stones. Now we're going to see in the next Mishnah, even when you're allowed to remove stone from the field, as in picture 82, you must leave 1 tefach, let's say about 3 inches of stone at the bottom. You can't quarry out until the dirt. You need to leave a tefach, about 3 inches of stone at the bottom, so that even if people will be able to see that you left some stone at the bottom. And obviously you can't plant if there's stone at the bottom. So even though in the picture 82, where you have the 3 cubes, 27 stones before Shemitah started exposed, you can remove the stone, but that's it. You still need to leave a tefach of stone at the bottom. So even in that case, people will not suspect that you're planting, you can't plant that stone. Now the Mishnah Vav goes into a fence. Go there, you have a fence made of stone. It has to have 10 stones. Take a look at picture 85. You see a stone fence that at the bottom it has a thin layer of stone. Then it has big stones in the middle, and then it has a layer of small stones on top. If you want to be able to remove a stone fence during Shemitah and make sure that no onlooker believes that what you're doing is you're going to plant, there are several conditions. A, it must be a fence that has 10 stones, masui shnayim shnayim. It has to have 10 stones that are so big that only 2 people can pick it up. Take a look on page 424, picture 84. 2 people are lifting up the stone. Condition 1, you want to take down a stone fence during Shemitah, there have to be at least 10 stones that are so heavy only 2 people can pick them up. We'll get into the reason in a moment. That's condition number 1. If you only have 9 stones that 2 people need to pick up, you failed the first condition. Hare elu yinatelu, back to page 424, then you can remove the stones. Shiur goder asaret tfachim. However, the height, condition number 2, the height must be at least 10 tfachim high, give or take maybe 35, 36 inches, maybe about a yard high. You take a look at picture 85 on page 425. You see that the picture is showing that the fence, the small stone, the small layer at the bottom, and then the layer on top, plus the big 10 stones in the middle, all together are 10 tefachim high. Because a fence like this, we call this is in halacha, it's a chashuv fence. It's an expensive thing to build. There are a lot of ways to build fences, but when a person goes to the trouble of putting up that kind of fence at that height with such a big stone, it is a chashuv. It's a fence that we consider chashuv. It has a very significant importance. It's not easy to put it up. And so when people take a look at a person taking apart such a fence, they don't believe, they will not assume that he's taking apart the fence in order to plant the small piece of ground that was under the fence. It's too heavy, too important, was too expensive to put up, that he would now remove it to get a little more space to plant a couple of more seeds. At that size, at that expense, the assumption is he needs these big stones to build something. Therefore, there's no Maris Ayah. So if you're going to take down a stone fence during Shemitah, two conditions. The fence must have a minimum of 10 stones. Each stone requires 2 people to pick it up, number one. And the height of the fence must be 10 tefachim high. If you're missing one of those 2 conditions, the test is failed, and then there's a different halacha. So in picture 86, they're showing you a fence that's less than 10 tefachim high, 86 aleph, pachos mi 10 tefachim. Okay, so you may have 10 stones that require 2 people to pick it up, but it's not 10 tefachim high. Or picture 86 bays, you may have a fence that's 10 tefachim high, but you don't have the 10 stones. So you may have 10 stones that require 2 people to pick up each stone, but the fence is not 10 tefachim high. Or you have a fence that is 10 tefachim high, but you only have 9 stones that require 2 people to pick it up. Means you don't fall under this halacha. To fall under the halacha that you can remove the fence during Shviis, you have to have a minimum of 10 stones. Each stone needs to be picked up. Each stone is heavy, that each stone needs 2 people to pick it up, and the fence must be 10 tefachim high. On page 425, the Mishnah says, pachos mikain. What happens if it's smaller than this? Either you don't have the 10 stones, although it's 10 tefachim high, or you have the 10 tefachim high, you have the 10 tefachim high, but not the 10 stones, or you have the 10 stones, but not 10 tefachim high. You fail one of the conditions. Can you in any way remove this fence? Pachos mikain, less than this, mechatzev. You have to use quarry type rules. V'gomimo ad pachos meha'oretz tefach. You can remove the fence, but you need to leave a tefach of stone at the bottom, so that everybody that's watching this understands that you took the stone to build and not to plant, because you left 1 tefach of stone at the bottom. So if the fence is 10 stones, each stone needs 2 people to pick it up, and it's 10 tefachim high, you can remove the whole fence. However, if you fail one of those conditions, you have a quarry rule. You can remove it, but you must leave 1 tefach on the ground so that everybody can see you remove the stone to use it as building material and not the plant, because you can't plant on a tefach of stone. Same rule as the quarry. Where you have the 3 cubes, you still have to leave a tefach at the bottom, so that even where under those conditions, where it was exposed before Shviis, people can see there's a tefach of stone at the bottom and you can't plant there. When are these rules said? The quarry rule of the 3 cubes and the rule about taking apart a fence, mitok shalom. If the owner of the field wants to remove stone from a quarry or wants to take apart his own fence, that's when these rules are applicable. But what happens, Reuven owns a field, and Shimon says to Reuven, I need stone. My house is falling apart. I need stone. And I know you have stone in your field. Can I take some? And Reuven says, sure, take. And it's Shemitah. Then it's okay. Now, this is the assumption here is that we're living in those times. And in those times, it was Hamish. People people lived in small villages. If they lived in an agricultural area, the farmers knew each other. It was Hamish. People knew who each other was, who each other were. So if you see Shimon going into Reuven's field and digging up some stone, you understand that Shimon is not digging Reuven's field in Shemitah so that Shimon can plant Reuven's field. The assumption becomes that Shimon got permission from Reuven to remove stone, and you can see it. Shimon is digging in Reuven's field, and he's taking out the stones to his field. So you understand that this is being done for building purposes. So all these rules are only where the Balabayas wants to dig in his field to quarry stone or remove a fence. If it's someone else, he can dig, he can remove as much stone as he wants. You don't have all these measurements. The Mishnah says another rule. When are all these rules said? A quarry of the 3 cubes and removing a fence 10 tfachim high with 10 stones that require 2 people to lift each stone. If you didn't start removing stone during the 6th year. But if you began before Shviis, before Shemitah, in the 6th year, you started digging your field and you started taking out some stone, Mashahu Rotze Notel, you can take whatever you want, even the owner. If in the 6th year you already started digging up the field and you're removing stone from it, then you don't have to be concerned during Shemitah that there have to be 3 cubes with the equivalent of 27 stones in them, or if you want to take apart your fence, you have to have a certain amount of a stone at a certain height. If you started to take it apart before Shemitah, or you already exposed the field before Shemitah to take out stone, so everybody knows that what you're doing is just removing stone, and therefore you can continue during Shemitah. The halacha of the 3 cubes to open a quarry is where you want to open it in Shemitah. So if it was completely covered in the 6th year, you can't open it in Shemitah unless there were 27 stones exposed before Shemitah started, then you can remove stone. That's only true if you never removed any stone during the 6th year. If you already began removing stone in the 6th year of any amount, people understand that you're quarrying and you need the stone. So we're now on page 426. So we had the case of removing stone and creating a quarry. First case of today. Second case of today was removing a fence in your field during Shemitah. And now we're going to a third case, which is stones that were moved and loosened during plowing. Meaning a person plowed his field in the 6th year. Take a look on page 426, picture 87. If a person plowing a field, the old-time plow, he's got his bull, his cow, whatever he's got there. He's got the plow, and the plow is turning the soil. And as it turns the soil, it hits a rock, and it begins to lift the rock above the ground level. So now you can see the rock. Obviously, this happened during the 6th year. You can't plow during the 7th year. So the stone already, the first case is avonim sheziason hamachresha, stones that became loosened through the plow in the 6th year. Can you now remove those stones in the 7th year? You need the stone to build. Obviously, you're not talking about a case where he wants to remove the stone to plant. The stone was loosened up in the 6th year because you plowed the area. The stone is now partially revealed above the ground, as you can see in picture 87. And now it's Shemitah. Can I take out that stone to use for construction purposes? Oh, the Mishnah says another case. Show you mechusas v'niskalu. A simple case. You had a case where the stones were covered in the 6th year and they became exposed. They just got exposed. So you didn't do anything wrong. Again, you may have plowed your field in the 6th year. Either plowing during the 6th year, you literally loosened up the stone and they're ready to just be removed from the ground in the 7th year. Or you were plowing in the 6th year, and as you were plowing, you moved the dirt, and now you can see the stone. If among the stones that became loosened or became exposed, there are a minimum of 2 stones that are so heavy that 2 people would have to lift each of those 2 stones, hare elu yinatelu, you're allowed to remove those stones, and even the smaller ones. If you take a look at picture 88 at the bottom of page 426, you have 2 stones that are big. Each of them would require 2 people to lift them. And there were also small stones. And the 2 big stones became loosened during the 6th year plowing, or became exposed during the 6th year plowing. In the 7th year, you're allowed to remove those 2 big stones that require 2 people to carry them, along with the little stones. Again, this is a case where the stones were exposed or loosened in the 6th year. There are stones there that are so big that 2 people need to carry them. People looking on understand that you're removing the stones to use for construction purposes, not to plant anything, because you didn't do anything. You didn't dig the stone. The stone was exposed already. The stone was loosened already. So you're taking the stone out for construction purposes. Again, we need to repeat this whole idea of Maris Ayin. Some of the things may make sense to us. Some of the things may not make sense to us, but that's okay. Not everything has to make sense to us. The important thing is it made sense to Chazal. Chazal were living in that time where they understood certain conduct would create assumptions by neighbors that you're doing something wrong, and certain conduct would not create those assumptions, and therefore they enacted the rules of Maris Ayin. If you do this, you create a Maris Ayin, prohibited. If you do this, you don't create Maris Ayin, and it's not prohibited. We need to be sensitive to the fact that Chazal understood exactly what they were doing under those circumstances. So yeah, if you want to create a quarry, you need a certain size, 3 cubes worth, 27 stones of this. That was how things were done then, and they were understood to be for construction purposes, and therefore no Maris Ayin. We need to be sensitive to Chazal developing the rules of Maris Ayin. And whether it makes sense to us today, it doesn't make sense to us today, again, is irrelevant. And that has this is how Chazal set up the rules of Maris Ayin. Back to page 426. Hamasakel esadehu. Next case. A person has a lot of rocks in his field, and he wants to remove some of the rocks. Perhaps he wants to clear the field so he can walk. Perhaps he wants to clear the field because he wants his cows to walk without tripping. Perhaps he has some horses, and he wants the horses to be able to gallop around the field without tripping and breaking their leg. He has a perfectly legitimate reason for why he wants to remove the stone. But an onlooker would say, why is he removing his stone? He's removing his stone because he's getting ready to plant the seed, the field during Shemitah. So how can you remove stone that's in the field during Shemitah? Hamasakel esadeu, somebody wants to remove stone from his field. Notel es ha'elyonos, you can remove the top stone. In other words, you have a pile of stones in the field. You can remove the top ones. Umenir es hanogos baretz, and the very lowest layer of the stone that's touching the ground, you leave those there, and therefore nobody can say that you are planting your field. You can't plant on stone, and that's picture 89. You can remove all the top stones if it's a small pile, and you leave the bottom layer. V'chein garger shel tzroros, or tzroros of pebbles, or you have a pile of pebbles, which is on page 427, picture 90. You have a pile of pebbles. Same thing. You remove all the pebbles, just leave the very bottom layer so nobody can think that you are planting, because you can't plant on pebbles. Ogal Shalavonim, or you have an entire like mini mountain of stones, which is picture 91. Notalelos Esrael Yonos, you remove the top stones, Umeniach Esanogos Boretz, and you leave those that are touching the ground. You can't plant on stone. Im yesh tachteim sela, if, take a look at picture 92, if beneath the rocks that you want to move, there's a huge rock underneath, you can remove all the rocks because there's a rock underneath it. You can't plant there. Nobody will suspect you're planting there. Okash or straw. Take a look at picture 93. You have a pile of rocks. Underneath it, there's straw. And you want to remove the rocks. You're allowed to remove the rocks because you're not going to plant on straw. In all these cases, you can remove the rocks. So while we're not farmers, but we do have gardens, there are things, again, that we're going to learn about when we get to the halacha portion of the Masechta and Rav Rimon Sefer. We'll learn about things that you can and cannot do in a garden because of Maris Ayin. So this parak sensitizes us to Maris Ayin, and we're going to apply that to the modern day garden and to a certain extent to the modern day farmer. We'll continue Mi'at next week. The next few Mishnayos in the parak continue with the halacha of stones. I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Yosef, but the nafkamina for us right now in the what we learned about the stones, I don't believe anyone's going into their garden and undigging the garden to create a quarry during Shemitah. So what we need to learn from the Mishnah is that undigging a field, even for proper purposes, you want to go into your garden and you want to dig up the garden for proper purposes, but there could be Maris Ayin. You need to you need to be sensitive to that. So I'll give you a simple example. Someone has a garden, and he has, as many first floor gardens have, the biyub. The building biyub is in his garden. And there's a problem with the biyub. In order to get to the problem, the plumber has to undig the garden to get to the biyub. He's going to undig the garden. Okay, so we get to the question of, is there Maris Ayin when you undig your garden? So obviously the answer is going to be, of course there's no Maris Ayin, because right outside your garden is parked an installato truck. In the garden is an installato with heavy-duty equipment digging. So therefore, there may not be Maris Ayin. But these are the questions that can come up when you need to do something in your garden during Shemitah. Is there going to be a Maris Ayin? We're going to get to the signs about Shomrei Shemitah, even people who are not farmers. If you have a private garden, you're supposed to have a sign on your garden. Again, we're going to get to the practical halacha. People have to understand that when Shemitah comes, that their gardens are quote-unquote hefker, and people are allowed to come and pick the fruits. Well, how can they pick the fruits if you have a fence around your garden? And in order to get into the garden, they have to walk through your house. So how is that hefker? We're going to get to all those halachas, b'li neder.